How are you?
Fine, fine. A little bit
How
hot.
is it?
Reds.
Yes, hot now. How are the vineyards?
Nice. It's a nice vintage with sun, rain, but no rust, no mildew, no diam, no problem. The flowering will start. It starts for the young vine this week, and for the old vine continue this next week. Main harvest beginning of September. It will be like 11 or 7 at first at the moment. The sprint is the same like 07 or 11.
You don't think it's going to be? You don't think it's going to be August?
See, it could be. The problem, if you said harvest next week, it will be 100 days, but now it's not 100 days. It's 90 days.
Ah.
Then it could be the 20th of August. But in 07 or 11, it will be more 11 days because it was bad weather in August. 18 or it's more 90 days. But
Wow.
7 on 11 is it's the same sprint, same flooring, but more 100 days.
Okay. And the water was good, right? We needed.
Yes, it's less water than Bordeaux. We have just a lot of people say it's dry spring, but it was a wet winters. Then you have more water in the winters than last year. Then
Yeah.
it's good to have water for the reserve for the summer. Donc we have the water for the summer.
Cool. So let's talk I mean, I tend not to spend too much time on history on these things, but I think it's important to say that your father started with 1 hectare. There was 7 children.
It's an old family in Saint-Aubin, and my grandfather have 7 hectares, 7 children. 7 children, each one be 1 hectare, and they start with 1 hectares. And they have an uncle in Chassagne, some tent. Some tent to rent, some vineyard like Thomas Moret have some Saint-Aubin from my grandfather. His wife is my cousin. La Rue in Saint-Aubin is married with my cousin too. We have some Saint-Aubin from the Lamys. And my father with 1 hectare can make the wine in the garage, small house and small garage. And after some years, it was too small, and he built the winery in '79. But the winery was very new for this age. It was by Gravières on the 6 meter.
Right.
Yes, it was new, and it was a little bit too big for him at first. But after 20 years, it was too small. We have to grow and to double. But it was. I'm lucky to have this new winery because it's more easy to work, and it's a good temperature, very good humidity, and it's good for long élevage with less CO2. It's very easy to work.
So when you came in '96, how many hectares had he built the Domaine up to?
It's my father started with 1 hectare, and after he ran some new vineyard. And when you have no money, the value of the terroir was not the same as now. And when you start, you can buy 1 hectare in Puligny, 1 hectare in Chassagne, but Saint-Aubin was less popular. It was more easy to buy Puligny, Chassagne. Saint-Aubin, it was very cheap. You can buy what you want, but you don't buy Domaine, Chatenière. You just have some vineyard in Saint-Aubin village to make Côte de Bonne village reds. And some people have some aligoté in the Archelois. Some people plant some Domaine reds because the white in Domaine was too difficult to sold. And now it changed, but this time was more difficult for the white to sold the white in Saint-Aubin than aligoté or Saint-Aubin reds.
So he had, I think you told me, 80% red at the time.
Yes, you have 80% reds. And in the vintage 89, you have only half an hectare of Saint-Aubin Premier Cru white. And now we have about 10 hectares in Saint-Aubin.
Yeah, but you're 80% white, you?
No, it's the production is 90% white, 10% red.
White.
on the area, the surface is 80% reds, but more all vine, less production. Then it's why 90% production.
Gotcha. So it's a huge change in. It's a huge change. I mean,
yes. And when I arrived in '96, it was new for me. My father buy and rent some new vineyard in Donchien 92, Remilly 91, Chatenière 92, Derchedor 93. A lot of new vineyard is coming. I'm coming at the same time. And we don't have the same customer to buy the reds. Then we need to find some new customer. And Pascal Marchand, Dominique Lafont, some new winemaker in Burgundy I visit to understand to make good wine. Say to some other importer, oh, it's a new winemaker in Saint-Aubin. Maybe you have to visit him. He's a good, nice people. And some people like Russell, like visit me 95 and just start with me when I start.
Well, so most people, you did school in Bonn, but most people decide to go to New Zealand or California.
Yeah.
Where did you go?
When I was young, I think it's nice to travel, but I go to Canada at the same time 3 months to do vinification in Niagara Falls to see the wine in Canada, and after I think the best wine was in Burgundy. It was more easy for me to understand the good wine. And then I visit Lafont, Rouleau, Coche-Dury, and so I need to make a new stage of 3 months or 6 months, I don't remember. And I asked Meo Camuzet to do that in Côte de Nuit, and I make 5 months in Côte de Nuit in '95 at Domaine Meo Camuzet. And for me, I was very lucky. I can meet Henri Jayer on for the vinification of the reds and the work in the vineyard. Those people work very, very, very well in the vineyard. They have good terroir, but it's very hard work. I can understand to try to make good wine, like mise en bouteille à la chèvre de bec, like to do all the vineyard in organic, but no control. But it's a good work to when you come from Saint-Aubin.
But you also said that it was almost like a different country because, for example, the quality of the genetic material and
sure. Yes, it's the same area, Burgundy, but Pinot Noir in Côte de Nuit is more elegant. But the Pinot Noir is not a selection of small berries, not the same. It's more ripeness. The vinification could be similar, but the terroir and the quality of the work and the quality of the selection massal and everything is different.
And so
it makes a difference.
And so you said that Henri Jayer would come by, every day and taste, and you would write down.
Yes, he was consultant for Meo. Then he visit each day, and we see him. He tastes the juice for vinification. He said, "Okay, maybe you have to harvest today. Now the juice, the pep is good, and the juice is good." And he do some what he think about the weather, about the vinification. And it was funny, and I put in my book all the same what he said, and I try to do the same vinification on my estate, but it doesn't work. I don't have the same grapes, the same terroir. And when I finished my stage, I was happy, and Jean-Nicolas was happy too. And he said, "We make a little tasting if you want, Olivier. I have some bottle of me and some other bottle of other winemakers they gave me when they arrived. And you have 6 wines to taste and blend testing." Henri Jayer was there. Henri Jayer said, I give you 1 bottle and you can put in the testing. And we do the testing. And 2 wine was very good. And all people said the same. 2 wine was very good. 2 wine was medium, and 1 wine was very less good. And Henri Jayer with accent, Burgundy accent, with roule les airs. He said, "Okay, two very good wine here. That's Burgundy. And 2 moyenne, maybe it's New World. And that's not very good. That's a bad winemaker of New World." And when you see the label, the good wine was Meo Camuzet and Henri Jayer, that's the 2 best wine. And after American wine, and the bad one was Saint-Aubin from Hubert Lamy, from Olivier Lamy. And I said, okay, I need to work more and more to make the best level of this. And that was funny because Yes, I think it would make good wines, but when you do blend testing, it was not so good. Okay.
No, I love that story. And so you came back to the estate. So 96, 95 was your first vintage, or 96?
I was half at Meo Camuzet. I can do what I try on half at the Domaine Lamy. Then it's 96 was the real 100% vintage. 95 it was half. 93, 94 I was there. I was still in school. I go to the army, but I said to my father, maybe it's better to change the press. Maybe it's better to use less crusher and we change a little bit the vinification with a little bit more new oak, a little bit. But it's a new idea, but it was my father still there. We move a little bit.
So you've changed a lot in the viticulture, and you're known for a few things, of course, high density, but we'll talk about that in a second. You were also the first to really, I think, believe and adopt Guyot Poussard in Burgundy after a meeting with François Dalle, I think, at the Geste.
Yes, 10 years ago, the Geste is a groupement SUV towards winemaker, another winemaker, try to find another way to make good wine and good, another way is more organic, more natural. And we make a conference of type Poussard, and for me it was evident it was a good way. And these people said, okay, there is a good winemaker in Pouilly-Fuissé, Monsieur Didier Dagno, do this pruning. And he do this pruning because his grandfather learned him. And he make a very good job. And maybe you can learn that to make good work.
So
we do that.
Because the danger at the time was Esca, right? With
the problem with the SK, with the production, is about in Burgundy, in Chardonnay, and the same in Sauvignon. It's about 3 to 5% of vine are dead each vintage, each year. Each year you have to replant a new vine, and then after 10 years, 50% are dead. But you have to replant. You have some new vine or old vine. It's a mix on the new vine. It's a low production. The rootstock is less good. And maybe you have 80 hectares in the vineyard. You have 80 to the vine was not dead, and 0 to the new vine. It's made 14 medium, but not very good for the quality.
And so the goal is to keep, 2 flows of sap, but also to keep the vine down by always.
Yes.
Going to get something under.
If you cut this arm, it will be dead wood inside.
Right.
After you have mushroom in the dead wood. Second way, it's this arm make a reserve. Reserve is mean amidon, and you can keep more life. When you cut the big wood here, the wood need energy to do cicatrization. If you cut a big arm, you need more cicatrization. And after, you need energy to do cicatrization. And the energy you use, you don't have the energy for mildew, for odium, for the stress of the way of the nature. Then it's important to have less cut. And this pruning make less cut.
You were even able to go and save vines. That's curtage, right?
Yes, curtage. Yes, because when we cut this big part by pruning, or maybe bad greffage.
Yes.
Bad greffage make here it's the greffage of the rootstock, and if they make bad greffage, it's there is a amadou inside the vine, and the vine will be dead inside.
So this half of the vine that was in front was dead, with hardened wood, and you can go in.
It was dead, and there is a mushroom, and mushroom is SK is a mushroom. It's yellow, and he eat the good wood and the bad wood, the dead wood and the good wood, and then we cut the vine and put out the SK with a tronçonneuse.
A little chainsaw. So it's kind of like going to the dentist in a way.
At first I try to experiment, but it's old fashioned on the, now it's 95% of a good, when you do that, you have 90% of the vine continue and have good life, and the 10% is dead. But other people have 90% is dead when you have a SK.
And you says you, including tractor accidents, you have less than 2% a year, or 0.5% a year of.
For me, it's more when you cut the grass, maybe you cut some vine, but it's like 0.5%.
Wow.
Of dead woods. On the usual, the medium in Burgundy is maybe 3%, and the big one is 10% of dead pagios. But the medium is 5, maybe 3-5. On me, 0.5.
Okay, but you started super early with this. I think you said you walked out of the conference or the talk and you went.
Yes, we start early, but because I work in the vineyard each day, I do the work myself, and then the people. When you are in the vineyard each day, you can help your people, your team. You can teach. It's more easy when you do the. Si on fait l'exemple, if you make it,
if you show by example, lead by example, yes.
Yes, lead by example. If you say to your people, you have to do that, it's more difficult because they don't understand. It's very difficult to understand this pruning. It's more. I was this afternoon with some young people. They said, "Oh, I understand the pruning," and we do some new vineyard, young vine identity. They said, "Oh, it's more difficult. It's more difficult." They don't understand.
So another thing you've started more recently is not hedging.
Yes, we try to. It's the same with the stress of the vine. We don't cut the top of the vine to have less stress and more construction of the juice. If you cut the top of the vine, if you cut the top of the leaves, go in the grapes, and you have big grapes, big juice, big skin, and less construction. With when you don't cut the top, it's less stress for the vine, and the grape are smaller. Madame Leroy do that since a long time, and she's the first to do that. And I think it's a good way. It's more work, but the early pruning, the early when you cut very early, the grapes are very big. And in the past, in the Middle Age, very long time, the king and the people of the vineyard said it's no good to use gamay, and it's no good to cut the top of the vine.
Oh, they said that too?
It's no good for the qualité.
Ils avaient dit ça? They said that back in the day? Wow.
Yes. In Bordeaux, there is still some book about that.
Wow.
And but the vine have less energy, it was less long. Now the density was more close, and then you have less, you don't need to cut the vine because it was more competition.
And so how many hectares do you do that way now?
You try to go, it's 1.5 hectares to turn. On some other vineyard we cut, but very late. Sometimes it's not a big difference between cut very late and very high. It's depending on the vineyard. And like the Lancien, it's a very no vigor. You can cut very late and it's very high. On some other vineyard, usually it's more the high density. On the vine with more vigor, we don't cut the top.
And so
and more the reds. Maybe we have to do more the reds. It's good for the reds to have more ripeness.
Okay.
It's different maturity of the touché de bouche. Touché de bouche, the tannin is more ripe for me.
Okay.
With tressage.
And you, in 17, we tasted side by side hedged and not hedged, and it was amazing, the difference in the density of the wine. I think it was Derrière Chez Douar, maybe, or...
Yes, and I do the same in Santenay with a friend, Santenay Gravières, not my vineyard, another friend, Jean-Marc Vincent, do that. Vinification with cutting and no cutting at the top. And for me, the touché de bouche was more elegant, more complex with don't cut the top and cutting the top. And the same for the white for me, but for the red is very easy to understand.
And of course, you're famous for high density. Now, that's also a funny story because it started as a mistake. Do you want to tell us?
Yes, it's my father in vintage '93 have to plant a new vineyard in Remilly, and the new vineyard was a terrace. On the terrace, it's difficult to have one 100 meter with a terrace. No possible to plant 100 plant. We have to only plant 60 or 70 plant because we have a little step difference
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
And my father want to plant 100 plant on 70 square meter. And when you plant 100 plants, it's more density, more close to have more hills, more grapes. But the result with more competition, the grapes was smaller. On more competition, make more rootstock, make more smaller grapes. The rootstock go more in the soils, and the grapes are more character, a little bit more stress, less vigor, and less juice, more dense in the wine. And we do a second vineyard with close protection. It was the same. And afterwards, vintage 201, we decide to plant this vineyard in the picture. There, Chedois with 0.3 to 1 meter. This means 30,000 van by hectares. It's only two small arm. It's little goblet with very close protection on the small grapes, like 30 grams by branch, by grapes.
Mm-hmm.
In Burgundy, usually is 150 grams. This vineyard is 30
So
grams.
they're five times smaller, the grapes.
Yes, on the other vineyard we plant, the usual vineyard, it's 0.7 to 1 meter. It's very close than usual, and the size is 70 grams.
And here, this is your Guyot. And
yes.
So you went in, so in vineyards that were already planted, you went in and put a vine in the middle. That's why you have two old vines here. And
the second story of this high density, it's in the Cru. My father plant this Chardonnay, vintage 72, 71. And the selection for me was not so great. He make big Chardonnay on the modulus. On the when I was young, I control each vine and say this is good. I keep these make good grapes, big grapes. I replant a new vine, and then I replant a new vine, and I said maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe I replant the new in the middle, a good selection massal of Chardonnay, and keep the whole vine. And to do vintage O2, I do haute densité to make good selection, to have a good selection in the middle of the, and to make a competition to the old vine. And,
so when you fully plant a vine like derrière chez Edouard, what's the advantage? The roots go down deeper, quicker?
It's more rootstock, more competition, more stress to the vineyard. And maybe the stress is good. Some people say it is no good. For me, the stress is good for the vineyard. It's good to make the stress make you have a little bit more ripe. The juice are more concentration, a little bit less water. The quality of the wine change, but it's depending of the balance you need or you want. If you want big hills, 40 or 50 or 60 hectares, you have to forget this view. It's good to make very low hills, make small berries, and the competition make a very good good balance in the grapes, natural. More sugar, more acidity.
So do you have any vines that are normal density left?
Yes, all the old vine my grandfather planted, like Chassagne Goujon. Mm-hmm. Some old vine in Frion is 8 years old, is 0.9 to 1 meter. It's a normal density. But I have maybe half of the estate to 0.9 to 1 meter, and 40% 0.7 to 1 meter.
So 9 to 1 meter is what density?
It's 11,000 wine varieties. It's more classic than Burgundy for Burgundy. Chablis is a bit more high. It's like 8,000.
Mm.
Here it's more 11,000. On some, it's depending on the vineyard. Sometimes Chablis like to be those 1.2 to 1 meter. On the us is 0.9 to 1 meter.
And 10 and 70 centimeters is what, 14,000 or?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And
70,
then derrière chez Edouard is 30,000?
30,000, yes.
And that's.
I have a small part. New plantation is 0.5 to 1 meter. It's 20,000.
20,000.
Because with 0.3, it's a very low vigor. The vigor is very. You have a lot of rock to have low hills. On the no vigor is mean more difficult to prune. So in the old books, they said the density plantation was closed because it was pruning short in goblet. When people do long pruning like Guyot, they use 1 meter to 1 meter because it's the size to do long Guyot. But after, for quality, for me, you have to change the pruning with a close plantation. On more, if you have more close, you have to do short pruning. Short pruning means low hills. That's
so
that's the balance. You need the balance between low hills and the.
So, but just to make sure, even with more vines, you get a lower yield. Because
that's or maybe I am a bad winemaker on the. It's difficult for me to make a balance between. But if you have a plate of 100 gram of pasta apart, if you have 1 people, 2 people, or 3 people eat in the same plate, it will be less to each people. It's the same if you have in 1 meter, 1 vine, 2 vine, or 3 vine, you have to divide the same quantity in 3. And then the grape are smaller, and the wood is smaller, and everything is smaller.
And but it's also the pruning, because I went to the Clos on Sunday to take a picture, and I counted the grapes, your grapes, and you have about, on average, 6 per vine.
Yes, maybe it's depending on the vine. The old vine, maybe it's 5, 6, 7. On the small one, sometimes it's 1, 2, 3. It means between 4 and 5 by vine. On the grapes, it's maybe 70 gram, 60 gram.
And your famous neighbor to the south has about 8 grapes per vine on average.
I see another neighbor.
And another neighbor had 10 to
maybe
12.
20. I see 20 grapes in just my neighbors. 20 grapes is not too bad, but it's different way. It's different. You have 20 grapes by vine. I prefer 5, but you have two vine by square meter.
But so
like 10, that's smaller.
Your neighbor right below you is on Crio is Lalou. She has more grapes on her vines than you do, by the way.
But the other neighbors is have 20 grapes.
Yeah, no, I saw it was crazy.
Yes.
It was crazy.
Yes.
So
but,
how much more work is it to tend to high density vines?
For me, when I do pruning, it's the double.
Wow.
Two times much work for pruning, too time more vine, two time more time to do the pruning. Everything is more long. If you have 3 times more vine, it's 3 times more for pruning, debult, do palissage, everything is more long. And
so you do more work, you have less yield.
Yes, that's a problem. Yes, that's a big.
Your father ordered the wrong number of vines. I just want to ask you: are the Lamys good at math?
I think for quality is good. For intellectual is good to ask for me to ask me the good question. After it's very expensive to produce. I'm lucky. I like the wine. I'm lucky the wine is good and people like it. But it's different way, it's different production. It's like 100 years ago, people drive the horse and have no car, and now you have a big car, and you come back in old fashion, and it's a little bit difficult, but I like it.
But what's admirable is also you do this mostly in Saint-Aubin, not Puligny or Meursault, or so that's pretty extraordinary.
It's I don't invite anything. In the past, the regal was 20,000 vine hectares or 30. It was not new. It's not new. It's new now, but it's old fashioned. It was a regal. Then Burgundy for 10th century, they use that. They do haute densité. And after the phylloxera,
Right.
they do more long pruning to have more hills. They can use the horse and after the tractor, and it change everything. But it's new. For the time for Burgundy, the haute densité was a regal before. And then I don't invite anything. It was old fashioned.
Yeah, no, but it's pretty crazy. And the tastings we've done when we moved to, I mean, I know I went to a blind tasting that you did, and I didn't do very good. I was embarrassed, but but sometimes it's pretty obvious the comparison between the high density and the normal parcels when you can. And the hedging was amazing. Let's talk about winemaking a little before we talk about the wine. So you're always very scientific or very rigorous. You always try things for a number of vintages before you adopt them.
Which I go to school, I learned something, but my father said every time you have to make your own test. Some other people said, oh, you can do this, and you try in Saint-Aubin, it doesn't work. Like I said with Henri Jayer on the winemaking, I do the same winemaking that I see at the Meo Camuzet, but it doesn't work in Saint-Aubin. You have to understand the element, and you have to understand everything, and you have to test on when we experiment. Something funny, but like old branches in reds. My father do old branches because he have no crusher. It was too expensive to have a crusher. And after the vintage 1989, he buy a crusher. And when we taste the old vintage, it was a little bit green, but some good vintage was great. Now we're coming back to use more crusher, more stem in the reds. And every time the life is the balance. It's not all the stem or all branches. It's no good. But you have to control between the vintage, between the terroir, and to change to understand what some terroir can use 90%, some terroir less, some vintage to the same.
So well, let's talk about the reds first, then, because you brought them up, and it's something. I mean, there was a very constant evolution on the whites and a more recent evolution on the reds. It's almost like you left them for later.
Yes. So the reds, I try. My father every time make good reds. I try to make good reds, but the appellation was less known on the. And I met some good people like Nicolas Potel, like some Pascal Marchand make good reds, Dominique Lafont make good reds, and Nicolas Rossignol make good reds. And every time they said to me, you make good reds, but every time it's a bit hard. And one time, Hubert de Vignes is coming to see the wine in the estate. And I think he was interested by the high density. He said me at the end of the tasting. And we taste some reds. He said, "Oh, it's not too bad." But for me, it's a bit. You need more elegant. You need to be more délié. And I said, "Oh, it's not possible in Saint-Aubin to be délié. It's a bit compact." And after some years, I said, maybe he's right. The wine is a bit more compact, and maybe you compact because we do vinification more control with control the SO2, control the oxygen, control the vinification, and the wine need to be more natural. And we use less SO2, more stem, and to do more natural vinification, and the wine is more délié now. I think the touche rouge is.
Let's break that up in a few talks, in a few different points. First of all, I'm drinking what's become one of my favorite wines in your cellar, whites included, is the Gravières, the Clos des Gravières, and this is the 2017. I had the 15 not so long ago, which is absolutely a brilliant bottle of wine. And we already drank the 6 bottles that you gave Becky. It's crazy good wine. I'm sure if it's served blind, people would not even know what it is. I don't think they'd put it necessarily in the Côte de Beaune. But you mentioned sulfur, so let's jump into that. So you really started not using sulfur during vinification in 2013, am I correct?
I experiment. Yeah, at first, I don't like to have people to make wine for me, but I need some help. And my help is Sylvain Bataille.
Yes,
that's very important, Sylvain, because it helped me to move on the vintage 08, 09. He said, "You make good wine, Olivier. I like your wine; it's good, but the wine is a bit more compact. Maybe use a little bit less SO2." On vintage 010, we try to use less SO2, and it changed the balance because when I use it, I use more late, but the wine was a little bit more hard because when you don't use SO2 at first, the wine is reactive to SO2. The SO2 is reactive after. And then you use less and less, and maybe 13 is the first vintage we tried. 13 is we understand when to use SO2 and why. It's the first vintage we have very low SO2. At first we do less and less and less. On 13, maybe the first vintage we have so low SO2 and so late.
But you even on that, you continue your trials, and last summer I think it was, we tasted the 18s. We did a sulfur tasting basically.
Yes.
With barrels that had no sulfur, with barrels that had petrochemical sulfur, and with barrels that had mine sulfur. And there is a difference. I didn't always.
There's a big difference.
I didn't always prefer the no sulfur or the mine sulfur, which also annoys me. But there's a big difference.
Yes, that's the problem. It's a big difference. And when you taste 1 month after, it changed a little bit. It was not the same. I prefer the one. There is an evolution. Sometimes one has good young, but when you age, it was reverse.
Where's your brain on that right now?
For me, sulfate is like medicine, medicament, and maybe you can use it, but if you use it, it will change. It's like antibiotic. If you use it every day, it's not good for your life. But you can use if you have a hail. And then SO2 is the same for me. You can. Super, Paul.
Sorry.
Voilà. Ça revient.
Ouais, c'est the joys of internet in Bouillon.
In Bouillon.
Okay. Attends voir que je vois si. Okay. It's all back. So, did you talk a little while I was gone? T'as parlé un peu pendant que j'étais parti ou?
Non, j'ai regardé les questions. Il y a beaucoup de questions intéressantes sur there is some question about the SO2 on the diam, about the Pascaline ask about the rootstock on the Marcottage, and there is a lot of question after.
So answer a couple of them, and then I'll jump back in with mine. So, do you want to take a couple of those questions?
You know, my English is not great, but it's all in English. I think she asked me about what about the Marcottage and est-ce qu'on utilise plus le Marcottage, je crois. I think the Marcottage for me is not great. I don't experiment, but I see some friends like Sylvain Bataille experiment, and when you have the mother vine and you have the second vine is a relation. When you cut the relation, the second vine is dead. It means maybe you can produce 2 times more with a new vine, but you know, don't produce 2 times more. The first mother vine produce 2 times more. It means the relation of the rootstock, maybe of the second vine is more the mother rootstock than the second rootstock.
Yeah, I think
And
so. Yeah, I think Sylvain is starting to think about it again, and he's not so much a
no,
fan
no,
of
continue.
it.
No,
Yeah.
he will stop. That's a lot of people do that in the past because it's about money. They have no money to buy the vine, the new plant. And when you have no money, they do provenage, they do marcottage.
Okay, well, let's get back to the reds quickly. So you started using whole cluster in 15?
I use more cluster with the Gravières. I buy this vineyard in 92, 12, pardon, or 12. And after one vintage, 13, I think, I use a little bit more branches in this vineyard because it was more elegant and it's more easy. And all vintage, I use 50%, 60, 70, 90% in the Gravières, and it's great. And after that, I use more in Saint-Aubin and Chataigners too. And Saint-Aubin and Chataigners is more vintage 15.
So where are you like in the 17 I'm drinking? Or what's the percentage?
15 is very high. On 19, it's like between 70 to 90%. On the less is 14, it's 10%.
Right.
On 17 is maybe it's 50%. 50% less than 50% branches.
So
this depending on the vintage, on the terroir. Maybe Gravières you can have more stem. And after Chassagne, maybe a little bit less on depending on the vintage.
So I want to talk about the vineyard a little, which I think I placed
yes.
did I put the pin roughly where it is, or?
Yes, but I have a little bit left. This, you see mine? It's here.
Is here?
Yes, the Clos des Gravières is here. I am here, but the Clos des Gravières, there is another owner in your.
So here's good now.
The second one is here. Is de Lavorey, and de Lavorey is a cousin of Hubert de Vilaine.
Yes.
De Lavorey is here, and me, I'm here.
So all these vineyards, Clos de la Gravière, all the Pousse d'Or vineyards, your Clos de la Gravière, these descended from basically the ex-owner of DRC, Duvaux-Blocher,
yes.
the de Lavorey family.
And yes. You have a big part of Gravières on Tavernier, and maybe the big part of here of Gravières from Jesum, come from de Lavorey too, or DRC.
But we all know this is a beautiful, beautiful wine, and we all know how in the past how great it could be with the wines, of course, of Gérard Potel.
Sure.
But Clos de la Gravière is a little special because, you know, the Gravières vineyard is huge. It goes all the way but this is really, and you don't even see it well, but it's kind of on a plateau, very high above the rest of the vineyards.
Yes, it's more steep, more drain. The soil is more poor, less clay. All the Gravières here, the big part is a white man and give very straight mineral, but a little bit green, a little bit froid, cold. On this more warm weather, hard limestone. On the neighbors, Clos Tavannes is more red soil, give more sweet, more round. And this Clos des Gravières make more elegant part of Gravières.
It's really gorgeous, and I guess time flies, especially with my little mishap with the internet. So let's talk about the whites, and maybe specifically Saint-Aubin. But you've had a lot of evolution with the whites as well. Do you want to, because you started, I mean, the major ones for me are when you started to crush the grapes for the whites.
It's like the old branches. My father do old branches. My father crush the reds, but he crush the reds when he do harvest. He use in French we say a ben. A ben it's a big vat.
Yep.
On the big vat with an hélice, une vis. On this vis crush the grapes, but in the bad way. You have he breaks the skin and break the stem and give green a little bit vegetal to the wine. Then I decided in vintage 95 to stop to use this machine and to use all to do all by gravity. Don't break the grapes, and you have less lees, more pure, more precise, more aroma, but less texture. But for Saint-Aubin, sometimes it's a bit green Saint-Aubin. On this this way, it was good for me at first. And after some vintage, the wine was elegant, but I prefer wine with more texture. I prefer to use a little bit foulage, and we maybe experiment in vintage 2011. I do a testing at Dominique Lafont on the Jean-Marc Rollo, and Jean-Marc do the foulage, and Dominique don't do. And Dominique experiment one cuvée Clos de la Barre foulé and no foulé. And Dominique don't like the foulé, and me I prefer the foulé. The foulé was more texture in the mouth, and the non-foulé was very precise but elegant, but less depth, just less weight for me. And I prefer as the next vintage I do more foulage.
You also saw a crusher at Willie Schaefer, you said.
I have a crusher, but I can move. I have it's a modern crusher, and I can move between the vintage and the terroir. Like hot vintage, hot terroir, we do more crusher. On fresh vintage, fresh terroir, you do less crusher. And
But you also, I think you also said you saw a crusher at Willie Schaefer in the Mosel.
Yes, at the Willie Schaefer, he showed me the crusher move on he moves the crusher at the top of the press, and he said me the same. Then some vintage on terroir, he do crusher, and it's depending on the terroir on the vintage. And I say, oh, it's a good, nice people, because it's not reset, it's vintage. He changes vintage.
And the second thing you're almost systematic about is the large format barrels on the whites.
Yes, in Burgundy, every time when I taste Burgundy, I smell, I taste vanilla, I taste the same aroma, and when it's aged, it tastes the caramel, and the evolution is quicker, and I don't like that. I prefer more fresh. When I taste Chablis with non-new oak, for me is very violent with the minerality. On Saint-Aubin with very mineral wine, the large format keeps the more mineral wine. And then at first, when I arrived in 96, I buy one demi-muit. Second vintage, I buy a second one. On each vintage, I buy some demi-muit. Now I don't use more new oaks, then I don't buy a lot of new oaks, and I have 100 demi-muit. Maybe the next vintage, I buy a foudre. Big food like 80 hectolitres, and to use biggest large barrique too more.
And but you moved entirely to large format in what vintage?
I buy one in 96, on the second one 92/7. On each vintage I buy. And after I stopped to buy. Stop. Some vintage in the past, I buy 10 demi-muit by years. But now I buy one or two in, I buy maybe 3 in 18, or 0 in 19, 0 in 16, 17, 15, 0. Then it's not very important now.
So there's almost no new oak on the
it's like 1 or 2% of new oak, some vintage on 0, some other vintage, depending on the crops. Like this vintage, I will buy foudre, then it will be new. Then I will have 18 hectoliters of new wood, but then you need to buy sometimes some it's a small quantity, a small proportion.
So one of the most amazing things, because I love going to your cellar when we taste the trials, because that's so educational. And I mean it's a very rare opportunity to taste diam cork versus cork, and to taste when you were still doing 18 months in élevage to 24 months élevage on the Cru. But I think one of the most impressive things I tasted, I think it was last year as well, is washed versus unwashed barrel. No, but it was crazy.
Yes, or wax or no wax or something. Wax barrique and no wax is very interesting and very.
Wax barrique?
It's for me, it's a little bit. But it's coming on the old fashion too. On the people in Burgundy on that school, we learn to be very clean on the tradition in Burgundy to clean the barrique each new vintage and to put the lees out and we experiment some barrique with all the lees since 2, 3, 4 vintage. On the each change you have more lees. On the one is a bit more reduction. On the for me it's more complex. But
It's very it's so dense. I mean, it's so power. I mean, that's what I got out of it. You seem to always be working towards vertical and density, and well, basically verticality.
yes, after we need good lees or maybe I don't know in the future. I continue, but this vintage 18 or 19, I keep all the lees of the past. Maybe we need to clean one barrique sometime. I'm not sure. We have to see to do the evolution. But the 19 vintage, we keep all the lees of the 18. To put the Frion 19 on the Frion 18 lees.
Okay.
Sometimes I clean one barrique to see. I prefer the barrique was no clean every time.
I guess it's time to talk about Saint-Aubin, I think. So Saint-Aubin is a little complicated or special, I guess, because you have a bit here that faces east above Chassagne-Montrachet, above Chevalier-Montrachet.
Right, Puligny, yes.
Above Puligny, this that faces south.
Yes.
A comb here that comes and cools things out.
Yes. Yes, that's more important. That the canyon here give more fresh wind of the haute côte of the vineyard here. It's coming on the other fresh wind is coming on the Goyer. Another fresh wind is going here. On the cold, very cold is the end of the Frion. And the fresh wind is coming to go to the Remilly, but Donchien and Chassagne, but just in the valley. The middle of the hill is very protect, no wind and very hot. On
So
this part,
let's
this
look
part
at
is protect.
let's look at this side, I guess, because you have quite a few vineyards. You have Les Frions here. You have Derrière Chez Edouard here.
Yes.
I think this is Haute Densité.
Yes, Haute Densité here.
Clos du Mec.
Clos du Mec here is protect. All this part is protect. No wind, no canyon. And if you go higher at the beginning of the Frion, there is just some canyon give fresh wind. It means in Saint-Aubin is about the same temperature of the neighbors, the night, the days. No, sorry, the same temperature of the days, sometimes more hot. Saint-Aubin is a bit in the canyon, it could be more fresh, but it's more protect. Then in the days, the same temperature or a little bit higher sometimes, but the night is more fresh. Then it means Saint-Aubin, there is more amplitude thermic. It's more fresh in the night, and a little bit more hot or the same temperature in the days. And for the maturity of the grapes, you have more difference of temperature and it's more complex maturation of the grapes.
Is this
what I mean?
Yeah, yes. Does this hill get, because you're pretty hurt by frost every year?
Yes.
This year a little in Chassagne, I heard, or
a little bit, but like 10%. It's not very important. But we have some Chassagne red is more the very cold temperature in Chassagne, being on Chassagne. We don't have the best terroir. On the best terroir like Montrachet, like Chevalier, maybe it's frost one time by century. Montrachet, the last time they do
16.
Frost, it was 16, but they never see. Some people never see frost in Montrachet. The big terroir, the good terroir, never see the frost. We don't have all the best terroir, but in Les Frions, there is more frost in Les Frions because there is the fresh winds coming on the canyon higher and go to Les Frions after.
And these are all, as far as Burgundy soils concerned, very white soils, right?
Saint-Aubin is a little bit more white soils. There is some white marl in Saint-Aubin, but the beginning of the hill is more red. Beginning of the Frion, beginning of Clos du Mec, on the top of their shore is very white.
But it's also extremely steep on Burgundy standards.
It's more steep, and it's not a big vineyard because it's very long, and there is a nature. There is some wood at the top, and you give more complex weather with the weather, with the temperature, with the wood on the grass at the top of the vineyard. Maybe it's 200 meters, and after you have wood at the beginning, wood at the top, and every time it's steep, every time is good exposition. Saint-Aubin is a very special weather. A lot of vineyards like Bordeaux like to use a new to plant some tree and to have more diversity. And this vineyard Saint-Aubin have a big diversity.
So, but generally these wines on this hill, they're fresher. I mean, they're pretty. They're like Riesling to me sometimes, you know.
When you visit me, we do tasting in the vineyard on Saint-Aubin. The more east, Frion d'Herchelois is more east exposition. It means sun of the morning, and sun is more fresh in the morning. Then you keep more freshness, more citrus in the fruit. On the part of Remilly, Chatenière is more south exposition, sun of the evening. And the sun of the evening is more hot and gives to the wine more creamy, more ripeness, more yellow fruit, more large wine. But still very mineral, still very shocky taste, because every time Frion or Remilly or Chatenière is very limestone.
So I have Frion and Henri 17, which are absolutely gorgeous, but you have Murger dans de Chien, which, well, the Wassermans have a sentimental attachment to it, because the first wine my mother ever sold in the US was a 76 Saint-Aubin from Gérard Thomas. So we're extremely attached to that vineyard, but it's right. Actually, there's a wood here, Montrachet. The actual name comes from Montrachot, something that's not planted, that's void of anything. But it's directly above Chevalier Montrachet, and it's pretty crazy wine. But it faces east, and then you have Remilly,
yes,
which has become my favorite Premier Cru, non-high density, super high density in your cellar. And I just want to share some pictures here. So stop share this and share this. Okay, here we go. This is not your vineyard, it's right next to it, but it showed the soil, and this is a little further, but that's the kind of...
No, don't share it.
No, it's
just in the border, just in the yes, it's just in the border. It's not mine, but not very far to mine.
But this was right next to yours, and that was the soil under it. And it's crazy because this wasn't even planted for many years, right?
Yes. This part, it was my father, some other winemaker, do some work to do plantation. He put out the big piece of rocks on plant some vineyard. But sometimes when you have it's difficult to work to cut the grass, because the soil is very poor. On the vineyard now, it's 35 years old, and it's better for quality and for hot vintage. Before the 10 or 20 first years, it was more stressed by the hot vintage. This terroir like middle vintage with some water. But with the age, 17, 18, 19, this vineyard is great.
I love it. And despite the fact that it's super stony and kind of high up on the hill, and I know you have several bits, there's and it faces south, and there's that little southern thing on the fruit. You know, I was comparing it to Frion, and it's not as white and clear and chalky. There's just a tiny bit of sunshine in the taste of the fruit. But then I guess one of your most iconic vineyards is Clos la Chatenière.
In the old book, they say the Chataigners is the best vineyard in Côte de Beaune. There is Cairet in Volnay and Chatenière in Saint-Aubin. That's the two best vineyards. And they said rien ne vaut, à part les Cailleraie de Volnay, rien ne vaut la Chatenière de Gamay. That's a 2nd-century book. They write that.
Wow.
My father buys this vineyard, this Clos, just here. He buys this Clos in vintage 92 to 1.3 hectares.
So that's a funny story because you said it was right after the oil crisis and nobody was paying attention.
Yes.
Because it was an auction or something, right?
Yes, it was an auction it was a Guerre du Golfe. On the commerce business for Burgundy was
right.
Yes, business for Burgundy was not great maybe, and there was an auction with 3 winemakers want to buy, 2 winemakers from Chassagne, and my father said, oh, they have more money than me, maybe they will buy the vineyard, but they want to divide, and they see my father want to buy too, and they said, okay, you can buy, and it was not so like this is expensive for my father, but now the wine could be 10 times more expensive than now. But this vineyard was not great form. It was old, so there is a lot of wood, a lot of wall to make the Clos. On the no, it's great. But my father make a big work in this vineyard for 10 years.
And it's a crazy vineyard. So
every time is very regular. When you do the 10 years blend testing with at your house, every time Chatenière is great. Each vintage is good. It's a very regular vineyard. Maybe
so,
old
but it's not quite as stony as Remilly, but you know, here are the vines, here's the bedrock. It's super steep.
Yes.
It's almost
yes,
it's very, very steep. You have to work everything by hand in this part.
Yes, you have to do all by hand, and this steep on the hard limestone keep warm weather. On the fruit is a bit creamy, on the ripeness, on the make a nice balance of ripe on mineral. But every time a little bit more sweeter, a little bit more round. Not sweet by it's Charlemagne sweeter. Mineral, but it's not sweet like when I say sweet. Every time it's very mineral, but a little bit more sunny, ripe fruit.
There's a little more. Your parcels are the ones that always have the roses on them, right? In Remilly.
Yes.
And yes.
So
yeah, it's got a little more soil despite than Remilly.
The beginning of the beginning is like 30-40 centimeters, but the top of the hill, like this part of Chataigners, is maybe 20 centimeters. Sometimes you have not the piquet. The wood is not the same place because it's not possible to put the wood in the soil. There is only 10 centimeters on the top of the Chataigners. Is so poor, it's like 10 centimeters. There is sometimes no vine because no soils. It's not 1 meter, sometimes it's 2 meters because it's too poor on the limestone.
I have one question. I have one more question. Is this yours? The tree?
Yes.
Are you going to do more?
In Chatenière, there is a beginning of the hill here, and after the top, and the tree is peach. And we do all by hand. And then in the old fashion in Burgundy, the people planting some peach, and I like the pêche de vigne. And that's good for diversity. And when I can plant some vineyard, some tree, I do some in the middle of the vineyard sometimes.
Does it affect anything? Because Dice says it actually affects his use of treatments.
At first, when you planting, it is no effect, but after 10 years or 20 years, it affects the vine. In the middle is less vigor, no grapes, and if what you like, if you prefer to eat peach or to harvest grapes, but it's not possible to have both.
Okay, we have a bunch of questions that went unanswered, so I'm going to JD Plotnick, who works for The Source and is a wonderful human being. What factors of vintage and vineyard terroir affect the amount of stem inclusion in the reds?
Some vintage like 18 the maturation, the sun make a ripe skin, but the stem was not ripe.
Hmm.
You can have 14 or 14.5 alcohol, but the stem was less ripe, and you use less stem in 18 than 19. It's my taste, in my opinion, it's my some. I'm not a big winemaker in reds. I try to make good reds, but it's you need experiment. You need all your life. It's but I remember the whole 64 Gérard Potel, Clos des Bousses d'Or, or Clos des Touré. You have no crusher, and you use new winery in Santenay, and you use 100% of old bunches, and the one was great. And sometimes he don't know it's his first vintage, and sometimes it's magic, and they have sometimes it's a feeling. It's a feeling.
But he changed his use of stems a lot, didn't he, Gérard?
Ouais, on Gérard, so he use less. It's depending of the.
There was no, and the
no
wines are magnificent. I mean, they're
yes, and they're great too. And then what I said is there is no. I don't like to make a recette. Sometimes it's great wine without a stem. Sometimes it's a great wine with a stem. And some terroir, when you have great terroir, Clos des Saint-Aubin is great every time. You can do what you want. It will be great each vintage.
Drew wants to know. Hi Drew, wants to know about La Princée.
La Princée, it's a cuvée. At first, it's a small vineyard. It's a sous-climat. Sous-climat, it means it's a climat, and it's a monopoly from us. And at first, it was one single vineyard, and after it was so difficult to have different vineyards in Saint-Aubin village, we make a cuvée, La Princée. Then it's a blend of 10 different parcels with different parcels, and some from écru will be classified in La Princée. Some parcel is more in the canyon. And it's 3 hectares with some vineyards protect. Some vineyards more in the canyon give more freshness, and some vineyards more protect, give more volume, more dense.
Well,
it's a big cuvée for us. It's the biggest cuvée in production.
Since you're answering that, your Bourgogne des Chateniers is not exactly des Chateniers, is it?
The big part is Chataigners, and the small part is Anjorcule. Anjorcule is another monopoly, is the climate. And my grandfather had this vineyard in the past. And my grandfather was president of le syndicat du village, of the appellation. And when he used the classification vintage 60, he changed a little bit the classification. There was more Saint-Aubin village. He don't want to use this parcel to have all in Saint-Aubin village. He stopped the classification in the middle of these parcels. And this parcel is 25% in Bourgogne Blanc and 70% in Saint-Aubin village. And then I have vineyard in Top Bataille, on the Traversaine, on Les Beaupins. Anjorcule is this one.
It's the end of that.
The end of the village, yes.
Here you go.
The end of the village, the big end is Bourgogne, and the other part is Saint-Aubin village.
Okay. Next question. Sorry, let me find them. Caroline wants to know if demi-muid and foudre are used for haute densité.
Yes, densité we use 1 demi-muid, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 demi-muid, sometimes the young vine. Like the last vintage is 3 demi-muid, but one is declassified in classic cuvée because it's a young vine. On the first vintage, 905, 06, I produce only 228 or 300, 350, sometimes two barriques of 300. I would like to use a foudre, but it's too small cuvée. And I produce between 300 to 1,600 liters on 0.7 hectares.
You're going to put the foudre on La Princée?
Yes, La Princée, it's a big cuvée, then it's more easy to. When I produce 150 hectares, I can use 80 hectoliters in the. Could be new. It will be less than 10% food on new. It's not so important.
So
La Princée.
cool. Paul Miller, who's actually known as Paul 2 because I'm Paul 1, wants to know what's the ideal barrel aging for you, and when do you start to have the benefit of autolyse? Would you age longer than 2 years? Like,
It's depending of your taste. I read sometimes people like the aroma of vanilla, of it's a very burgundy typical. For me, I don't like that. I like the 10 years old barrique. For me, the good barrique is between 12, the oldest, the 13, 14 years to 5 years old. Before 5, it's a bit okay.
I
After
think
5 is better. On the like now, I like the 13, 12, 11 barrique.
I think Paul meant la durée de l'élevage. What's the ideal durée d'élevage?
The wine change. At first, you have more primer aroma. The 12 first years, the 12 first months, it's more aromatic. On the contact in the lees, for me, is good after two years or 18 months, depending of what you use on the vintage. But the wine change on the something very strange. But the pH is lower after the second years.
Really?
When you harvest, it's maybe 3.2, 3.3. After you have malolactic, it could be higher. But if you make very long élevage, sometimes it's 3.15 after 2 years.
Really?
Less than you harvest. There is combination of the lees and the potassium, and you have a better acidity. And some people say the long élevage is better for hot vintage with low acidity. More complex one.
Also, the longer élevage helps stabilize the wine naturally, right? So you need.
Yes, sure, it's stabilized. You can do no fining. You have the SO2 is very evident, very active. The wine are more strong, and the wine is more. The contact with the lees give more complex wine, more patin. It's a mix between ripe and fresh. It's a good. In the taste, it tastes like a little bit mint, a little bit fresh and ripe. It's a good. The lees give a complex wine for me.
Do you like some of the wines that are aged, the whites that are aged 5 or 6 years or 7 years, like Valette or?
Yes, it's I like Champagne Pascal. Sometimes I sold my at first I keep my barrique 3-5 years. After 3-5 years, I sold it. I sold the barrique in the past. And I sold to some other friend, and I sold to Pascal Agrappa in Champagne. And I visit Pascal, and he showed me this wine, and I said, "Yeah, that's your barrique. You want to taste?" And I say, "Oh, that's better than I prefer the taste of the barrique at your house than at mine." And then I said, "Maybe you have to keep more long. You have to keep more long time with the barrique." And then I stopped to sell the barrique after that.
I know a lot of people are very sad who used to get barrels from you. Aurélien Gerbet is sad. Everybody.
Yes, yeah. I have a lot of people ask me to have some barrique, but okay, I don't. I have sometimes some 300 liters I sold after 10 or 15 years, but 600 I keep them for the moment.
Icy wants to know 2 things about not hedging the vines. Does it increase, well, she wants to know 3 things, but she put it in 2 questions. Does it increase disease pressure and increase photosynthesis? Does it do anything to the vine roots?
I need to do translation. Tu peux traduire, Paul?
Ouais, donc le non-rognage, est-ce que...
le non-rognage, voilà. Okay, I understand now. Okay. Non-rognage is mean you have less vigor, and then the leaf is smaller. Then you have less portion of mildew of odium. It's not a problem. A lot of people say it's a problem. The people use more chemistry, have big leaf, and have more problem of mildew. If you have small leaf, it's no problem. Just sometimes the top of the canopy is very high. It's 2 meters, 2.50 meters. And maybe there is some mildew at the top, but it's good vintage, it's not a problem. Bad vintage, maybe it will be a little problem. Be careful about some vintage.
And Saint-Aubin is not like Von Romanet. You can't go and change all the posts to...
you spray by hand and sometimes for the top, but you have less mildew in Saint-Aubin. Every time Saint-Aubin is more drain, more wind, it's more easy with the mildew. It's a little bit more difficult for the odium, but more easy for the mildew.
The second part of IC's question was, does it change anything in the root comportment of the root? Est-ce que ça change quelque chose au comportement des racines?
Maybe it's a more this way. No people control it, and no people make some experiment about that. But I have a young winemaker going stage in 05. The vineyard in Chataigners was 5 years old, high density, and we make the same in 14 to 30,000 make force. And we see the rootstock, the same rootstock, the same portrait, the same age, the same everything was the same. But there is more competition. It was more deep on the rootstock. Go more vertical, high density, or more horizontal in 14,000. And when you make a number of rootstock, there is more rootstock to have less grapes, but plus de racines pour moins de grappes in high density. And
more roots for less grapes. Okay.
Yes, and more competition to find the element she need, and then she have to watch to take more element, and she. Je pense que c'est un porte-greffe moins feignant et plus de travail. Donc, il est plus complexe et plus chevelu, plus il va plus loin dans les hautes densités. Et plus tu élargis ta densité, si tu as 2 mètres ou 3 mètres, tu as un système racinaire beaucoup moins développé. Donc, tu as un vin avec plus de fruits. More fruit in the wine and in the grapes if you have a large plantation. And close plantation make more taste, more limestone. It's like a pump of terroir for me. So I just say that's like a pump of terroir.
Yeah, it's amazing. Is there anything we didn't ask you that you'd like to say?
It's more work, a lot of work. I like to work. I'm young, but it's difficult. It's difficult way because it's more work. It's more easy to go 1 meter and 1 meter, 2 meter to large. You have less work, more hills. Some people said you have tu n'es pas feignant. It means you like to work. Okay, I like to work. Then I like this way. But it's more difficult for the young people or people who work for me. It's difficult because I'm very exigent. And some people say the vineyard is too nice in your vineyard. After it's difficult to have the people make a comparison. I don't like that because I try to make good job. I think it's a good way. I don't like to make comparison between the neighbors. If people want to make good wine and they have good results on different results, you can buy good Carive Colamore, good Lamys, good different tastes. And you can choose what you
like. But you don't like. I'm not going to say which one, but they're winemakers in there. You mentioned that make wines that are very aromatic, very reductive, very here. You make wines that are,
After what I said, it's different winemaking, different, but it's very efficacious. Very people like it, and it's a good one too.
Is there anything? Is there anything you're trying that we didn't talk about? T'as des essais qu'on n'a pas dit?
10 years ago, it was not easy for me to say what I will do now. And maybe it was not possible to say me about the clean, the barrique, or no clean, or the SO2, sous Domaine, sous classic. It was not in my head 10 years ago. What I like in this work is like everything is, you can experiment everything, and you can learn every time something. And then in the future, I don't know what I can change a little bit, not change, but to find some another way. But what we find some other way is not new, it's old-fashioned. We speak about some friend, like we can do some vineyard all by hand, no machine, no tractor. But after it's more work, every time it's more work, and it's coming back on old-fashioned, it's more work, and it's difficult to find people to do this work. That's a problem. And between what you like and what you do, you make sometimes a little bit a mix. Sometimes high density could be by hand. You don't cut the top. On some vineyard, you can use a tractor to have a mix of each. If it's modern and classic.
Yeah, last question. There's a lot of talk about no tilling, pas de labour. Is it possible in Burgundy with the vine density we have?
The close plantation, the big problem in Burgundy is the close plantation. If you have, it's a balance between the space between the vine and the grass. If you have two metalage or one metalage, it's not the same. And if you make no labour, you have grass. If you cut the grass, you can try 1 year, but in the future, it's more difficult. It makes more stress. The grass. I experiment some, but it's difficult. It's my experiment. But if you have more grass, you have less. You need fertilizer. It's depending of the story of the vine. If your father use a lot of fertilizer, it will be work because you have if you have a poor vineyard, no fertilizer, the vineyard will have too much competition, and after you have less fermentation. The vineyard difficult to have fermentation. You have more bread, more good souris. It's another way and different. It's depending of the story. There is no rigor. And depending of the soil, if you have Vignes of the Hill of Chassagne, it's not the same of Remilly with no soil or Chatenière. And maybe you can use one terroir, but sometimes some vintage is good, some vintage is no good. It's depending of the age of the vine, depending of the terroir, depending of the vintage, the story. So it's very complex.
Olivier, I think, thank you.
Thank you. It's me. I tried to answer all the questions after.
Well, I just hope we can start tasting again soon and having fun tasting your experiments and the 19 soon, which is very exciting.
Yes.
Did you bottle? No, you didn't bottle all the 18s.
No. Nothing is bottling in 18 in August, I hope.
Yep. Okay, so we still have the 18s to taste, which is actually, no, let's finish on that because 18s are super exciting for white.
Yes, it's a nice, for white, it's a good surprise. It's
a very big surprise, right? Where does acidity come from?
It's a good surprise because at the end, the acidity is very. I think it's come from the lees. It's come from the lees of the high long élevage make balance with better acidity now than at the first 6 months.
Yeah, well,
the old fashion make a good long élevage with a lot of lees make more acidity. That's,
yeah, it's pretty.
Sometimes people say, "Oh, I have a friend of me. He's come from Vouvray. Asked me a question on my computer. Said me 2 weeks ago, Olivier, do you use acid malic, acid tartric, acid citric? Why? What is the level of SO2? Why? There is some Vintitude. What is Vintitude? Is some other winemaker from Meursault said you use acid in your wine. Ha ha ha. I don't use any acid in my wine. It is, but in your taste, in the taste of your wine, it's more fresh than the other wine. Maybe it's Saint-Aubin, maybe we don't use fertilizer, maybe it's the long élevage, maybe it's the demi-muit, the cold cellar, make a balance with more fresh than the neighbors, but we don't use any acid to the wine. And the SO2 is less than some other winemaker, other people don't understand that. But on me, I don't understand every time too. But I observe, I said, oh, it's more fresh than 6 months ago.
Well, you do make some of the most electric wines in Burgundy. Thank you for that. Please make them even more electric. Actually, make the whites even more electric and the reds a little nicer, which you're doing.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much. I know.
Thank you very much. Merci. Bye bye. Have a good night, good weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye.